as we are a small group, it would be lovely if our guests, Kate, Charlotte and Shireen, could say hi and a little bit about what draws them to this event this morning. Perhaps we'll start with Shireen. Are you able to introduce yourself and unmute?
Hi, my name is Shireen and I'm in Jönköping in Sweden, and I got involved with the Young Writers Lab project when Mel came to Jönköping a few years ago, and it was really interesting, inspiring to see how she and Joke inspired the children here to write their books and poetry.
Great, thanks, Joke. Kate, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, Mel. Very nice to see you.
Hello.
Yes, thank you. My name is Kate Fawzi. I did the same training as Mel, and I'm just curious about this project because I work with young people. I've got a teenage workshop out in my garden this afternoon with a group I've been working with for the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm just really curious to see what you've all been up to. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks for joining us, Kate. Yeah, Kate and I did the same course in Bristol, but with a few years difference. And fascinating to think that you're working, closely distanced, safely, but closely in person with young people in your garden this afternoon. And we kind of work. We did do close work, but most of our work in Young Writers Lab was actually distanced and was, kind of through these media, these video calling media, before Zoom was even heard of, I think. So it's interesting to see it all kind of weave back together. Charlotte, Borodar, say hi to everybody.
Charlotte is still not connected to audio, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. So Charlotte is a writer from Carmarthen. She and I have been doing quite a lot of work together over the last couple of years. And Charlotte's got a background in teaching English and drama. So I guess hence the young person's interest. And Charlotte also has 4 small children. So she's kind of busy doing the octopus thing of not necessarily juggling, but trying to swing them round into some form of control so that she can join in our sessions. Welcome anyway. So perhaps if Inish and I can say a little bit about Young Writers Lab, where the idea came from and what the approaches were. I know, Inish, I'm kind of springing this on you, but are you able to say a little bit about how we got into it and what our vision was and how that panned out?
We both were residents in Tranos in 2015, and we got back in 2016 at the Fringe, actually. And during at the Fringe, we had a workshop where the idea came out as a response to some ambitions from the municipality, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Because Peter Neiberg was doing a workshop and asking for, and Peter is working in the cultural regional department, and he was asking how it would be possible to put youngsters writing and closer to literature. So an idea came out, but we were not expecting to develop a project during so many years, and here we are. So that's the beginning. obviously, then we wrote the project. There were applications for funds, and then Mel can continue.
Great, thanks, Anish. I think because Anish and I we were in Tronos in 2015 for the residency. We went back in 2016. We were doing work in the local high school in town, and we just thought although we did go back a lot to Sweden, we can't keep on going back to Sweden. We can't kind of base it on that, because the young people really seem to respond to the kind of approaches, sort of non-formal approaches that Anish and I were taking. And we thought we can't base a project just on going back all the time. We have to develop a different way of being with young people. And we came up with this idea of working remotely, and we had to. I was coming back to Wales, Anish was going back to Portugal, and yet we were continuing a relationship with young people back in Tronos. And we kind of ran it as a bit of a pilot for a couple of terms to see that if we could maintain and sustain that relationship that we had with young people. And we certainly did, because it's resulted in the production and the publication of material. So we were keen to engage with young people on the whole arc of aspects of writing. So from the initial tentative scratchings on the page, right through to the publication and the promotion and the launching of their written work, so that young people had the opportunity to experience the life of a writer at the whole stages, all the stages. So we were very fortunate in getting funding from the kind of Arts Council in Sweden, and we then did return, because I think what we found was we needed to have that kind of initial engagement, that live engagement with young people in the space and in the room, and that really resulted in getting a strong relationship going, which we could then sustain on a virtual basis. I think that's probably fair to say. So perhaps I'll say a little bit about the groups that I ran, and Anish and Joachim and Elizabeth can talk about their different approaches. So I worked with kind of three groups actually. One was through the drama department, the aesthetic studies department in school in Tronos, and they were doing a response to a young people's mental health survey that had taken place in the region, and the school had been invited to do a dramatic response to the outcomes and the recommendations of that piece of research. So I worked with the drama teacher and with the young people to build in some poetic response to that. And that resulted in a performance, a production that was called Pitch Black, which they performed in 2018. Yes. And part of that, I was really fortunate to be able to bring in a local poet, Joachim Becker, local to Tronos. And Joachim came in and read some of his poetry, and I facilitated a session where we responded to some of Joachim's poetry as well. And that was very, very moving, because Joachim was able to talk about his own mental health and his drug addiction journey, and then also about his poetry writing journey as well. And he's still publishing. And I think it was also helpful to have a kind of, somebody from the street, somebody from the town in Tronos for the young people to meet with, and somebody who was maybe a little bit closer in age and experience to the young people than I was. And that was very powerful, and Joachim came to the performance that they did. So they were weaving writing into other media as well. Another group that I worked with, that came out of work with some children in what we in the UK would call a primary school down in the southern part of the region in Jönköping, and that was thanks to very, very strong support from the local library and the teacher in the school. And Yoka did some work with that school, and perhaps Shireen and Yoka can talk about that, but I also did some sessions based on taking the principles of The Lost Words by Robert Macfarlane and encouraging the children, A, to enjoy their environment, but B, to write some poetry from that. And then we also had a huge social and emotional impact, because there were children in that class with particular learning and social and intellectual needs who, as a result of that project, felt much more included within the class, and the children felt much more respectful of the situation that those particular children found themselves in. So, you know, as we know, writing not only develops our kind of writing skills and development, but it develops us socially and culturally, and it opens us up to a whole wealth of other experiences and opportunities. And the third group that I ran was across...
Mel, I'm sorry, but I don't hear you very well. I don't know if it's happening with everyone.
Okay. Can others
sometimes
hear me? You, Kate, can hear me?
Okay, I'm just coming in from backstage. So Mel is speaking. Ines and Tronos both have their mics on. So if Ines and Tronos would like to mute their mics, that will probably give Mel the best audio.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, Ines? Yeah, okay. So I was just talking briefly about the last group that I ran, which was kind of truly international group, because we had 3 young people from Wales and a young person from Sweden who joined together, and I used to kind of facilitate writing sessions with them over a period of a few months. So although we kind of set off with the idea of having international writers paired with Swedish writers as adults, we had young Welsh and young Swedish writers pairing up or coming together as writers as well. So, you know, that was an extra added benefit of the project. Ines, do you want to say a little bit about the work that you did? And I'll mute.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Can you say a little bit about the work that you did with your groups and Ranim in particular?
Okay, so back in 2015 and 16, we, like Mel said, we went to the high school and we did some workshops, but they were, I mean, they were inside of the residency program, and then obviously with the project, with the Young Writers Project, we started to develop workshops with an intention of having youngsters in the project, and the sessions were also worked out using non-formal education methodologies, some obviously more experimental, but others coming from our own experience, because I'm working with non-formal education for 20 years, and Mel also has her experience, and so we were trying out some methodologies and some approach. About the youngsters, because this is an experimental project and very focused on the relationship that we establish with the youngsters, and also because they are free to participate. I mean, we were going to the schools, but the participation was not an obligation from the students, so that we were inviting the youngsters to participate in the project. So this means that it depends on the free will and the compromise of the youngsters, and if they want to go ahead and to write and to have a kind of a mentor or an orientation from someone, and depending on the time. I mean, I worked more with fiction, and for 1.5 years I was following a group of youngsters from Sweden, and they all wrote one of those books that Mel shown, the unfinished book, which is a chapter of a novel. So this means that we had to work along the year during several sessions online, and also some intranas when I was going there intensively. I mean, for long hours, and reviewing text and review narrative, and so it's a very complex work and intensive work due to the construction of a story and with several characters, and furthermore this particular group, they were doing their individual stories. They were writing their individual stories, but in the end, all their characters, they were part of another layer of story, which was the way that I found to mix their work in one. So this means that we were meeting several times online. I was doing we created a Facebook group just for you to understand the specific details of each group. I mean, because we don't work, and I think Mel explained that, we don't work the same way with all the groups of youngsters. It depends on the objects, it depends on the writing and exercise, it depends on the will, what they want to achieve, and the conditions. I mean, and then I would explain other groups. But with this one, we created a Facebook group, and I was delivering some videos sometimes with exercises. I was following the narrative of each of the characters, so I would know what kind of exercises I would propose to each of the youngsters. And sometimes I was sending exercises that would create a link between their old stories. So in time, we were able to build up a narrative through the individual stories and the one that end up becoming a book, if you are understanding my English. So this was with the 10 Circle group, and these were a group of 6 youngsters between 15 and 17 years old, and they were from a class of the high school the literature, from the arts area, I think, and I invited that whole class to participate in the Young Writers Lab, and these 6 youngsters, they said they wanted to try, and then we were 1.5 years working on these stories. So this was with one group, and now we are not working anymore, but we still have the Facebook group, and some of them they still writing, and they still sharing their writings with me, and in a way I continue following them in terms of writing. And at the same time, I developed some workshops with some classes with students coming from abroad, from other countries, from Afghanistan, from Syria. And with those groups, the experience was totally different. I mean, some of the youngsters, they never went to school before they arrived in Sweden. So they didn't had even the experience of learning before. And this is very interesting to see also how fast we all can learn when we have the willing to it. So, and some of them, they were not writing in English. They were not writing in Swedish even. So the experience was clearly experimental, but also very intensive and emotional. My approach with these groups were, in the beginning, were mainly to work on visual poetry and on visual diaries. So instead, obviously, we were trying to communicate through language as much as possible. I would speak in English, in Spanish, in French a bit, and trying out anyway. The teachers are very important. Were very important with these groups because they make a bridge, because they already know the groups. And the youngsters, they know at least how they could communicate more, or the words they already know in Swedish. So they would be translating somehow some exercises. So I tried out a lot of things. Some of them, like I told, more with visual poetry, others with small exercises, like writing small exercises in their own language. So, because also this is an international project, Young Writers Lab is an international project, and the individual experience is very important for us. So during those workshops, it was not necessarily that I would be able to see the results of the exercises from the youngsters. The most important in those workshops would be that they would have the opportunity to write and to try out a way to write about different subjects or different experiences. So furthermore, with these groups, it's very interesting. It was very interesting to understand that some of these youngsters, they are in a particular moment of their lives where the fiction or literature can be very useful to bring up other perspectives on life, or to make them to have kind of a relief feeling, because some of them they would not want to write about their own stories. And I mean, some of them they had passed very difficult times coming from their countries to Sweden. So it was really interesting to understand how the small workshops and the small exercises, with or without narrative and poetry, or more or less collages or visual exercises, would be so welcome, very welcome from them, and that would leave something for them. From those groups, I've been following a girl called Ranim Knight, and since 2016, and she is writing a novel, and she's from Syria. She writes originally in Arabic, and then we have sessions where she translates. She translated into English with her English, and then we speak about what she has been writing, and we work on 1, 2, 3 paragraphs each time. So it's a very slow process, but we move on. We continue, and I think that's it for now, Mel.
Okay, thank you, Ines. As you were talking, I was remembering and I've got photographs, but I don't think we've got time to screen share them. But the books, the collage books that the young people did from that Newer Idols International group that you worked with, and yes, it was a very powerful experience, I know. So going to the Tronar stage, to Joke and Elizabeth, perhaps you can share a little bit about your role, Joke, particularly the work that you did in Hanover, and Elizabeth, the work that you sustained all the way through, and perhaps leading into some reading from the most recent work that has been kind of published this year.
Yes, thank you. Oh, okay. I am more a backstage person in Young Writers Lab, I think. At the beginning, we planned to have groups all of our own. I would have a group of young people too. But I noticed really quickly I'm more a writer that works with younger children, and you can't force things to happen when they're not meant to happen. So I had the pleasure to do some workshops in Gnoege with children from 11 and 12 years old. And the most striking thing there was, and I notice it everywhere where I have workshops with younger children, you reach them in schools. That's like a normal procedure. Also for Young Writers Lab, you reach a lot of young people at schools. That's where you find them. You can't just pick them up at the street. But a school environment is not the same as an art environment, even if it's the same place. So I worked with those classes together with my son, the teacher, and Shireen was there too. And what I noticed was that some of the kids not doing well at school were brilliant at interacting with me and at writing. And when I read all their work and I told the teacher, there is one that's really brilliant, she never guessed which one it was. And it made me so happy that children being really terrible at Swedish terrible at mathematics just can be brilliant artists. And I think that's my job at Young Writers Lab to convince children and young people how brilliant they are. So that's the genoegen part. Yes. Elizabeth.
Okay. When I heard about this project, I thought, well, let me in. I want to be a part of this. And I talked to Mel and Colm and Joke, and we started a group to work with this. And we didn't work with school kids. We have to go out and find other ones. And Mel and I were at some libraries, and Joke and I was at some other libraries to find some youngsters to have in a new group. So we found from Tranås, Alvesta, Vetlanda, so not the same cities. And they became my group, and they were called the new group in 2 years. They didn't find a new name, so they were the new group. And we have met once a month on Messenger, and they have texted me in the middle of the night when they have something come up in the brains that I want to write about. So, so it's more intense to have youngsters, because when you have younger people, I think you have a group and you do the session and then you're ready. When you have youngsters, they tend to be closer, further away, but closer to you, because you're connected to this one all the time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I had such a great time, it's a privilege to be a part of reading all the stories, and that they have the confidence also to let me read it, and the other ones in the group also. Because it's part of your soul you're letting out when you're a writer. Yeah.
Would you like to read some of the pieces?
I should read one of the participants. He couldn't be here. So I will read it, but I will read it in Swedish, if it's okay. Oh, well, I can short translate it. Say hello from me, and I enjoyed the group, and I really like to be on the Fringe Festival. He was one of the part of this last year. And I felt so inspired and have learned lots of new things. And I also thank you for all the new connections that I've got, that I can discuss all things that have to do with writing. Yeah, so not all of them, but some of them have sent him some text, do you see it? Yeah. I don't know which camera. Yeah. So 4 of them has sent in the texts and got published. And I don't know, shall I read it? Some small bits from each one of them, or yeah? This is Plågan by Solara Kant. Plågan. Dimman skingras äntligen och månen syns tydligt nu. Det där runda, lysande, vidriga klotet på himlen som jag är så rädd för. Livrädd faktiskt. Jag har alltid varit det. Ända sedan jag var liten. Jag börjar springa bort mot skogen så fort jag kan. När jag var liten fick jag hjälp med min fobi. Hjälp av mamma, pappa, läkarna och psykologerna. De sa att den inte skulle gå att bota. Jag var obotlig. Jag har aldrig stött på någon annan som är som mig. Så jag antar att den är rätt ovanlig också. Den här plågan som inte har lämnat mig och inte kommer att göra det heller. Jag springer ännu fortare. Jag hatar den. Jag hatar natten. Jag hatar mig själv.
Varför lyssnade jag inte på mamma när jag var barn? Varför var jag så dum och gick ut i skogen själv? På natten dessutom. Trots att jag hade sett och hört om vad som stod i tidningarna. And I know that this is part of I think she's planning to write like 3 books in a series. So this is some part of it. And Daniela Albinberg, she's written Stigen till kyrkan, The Path to the Church. Gruset knastrar under Alice skor när han går längs den smala stigen. Vid båda sidorna om henne står skogen så tät att det är svårt att se in ens en meter mellan träden. Men rakt fram på stigen kan hon redan se den ståtliga stenbyggnaden sträcka upp sitt kyrktorn mot himlen. Vinden som börjar tillta får det decimeterhöga gräset framför kyrkan att nästan lägga sig platt mot marken. Som om de bugar för byggnaden eller det som finns där inne. Den tanken får Alice att fnissa. Hennes fantasi får allting att verka så levande. Och innan hon öppnar kyrkans port myger hon artigt för gräset. I fall. Inne i kyrkan slår tystnaden emot henne. Och precis som varje gång hon stiger in här blir hon förvånad över att ett ställe ens kan vara så tyst. Efter bara ett par sekunder bryts dock tystnaden av fotsteg mot stengolvet bakom Alice. Och hennes mamma stiger fram och tar hennes hand. Tillsammans går de fram till altaret och Alice ser på när hennes mamma stänger dörren och tyst mumlar en bön för sig själv. Som alltid försöker Alice klara ut vad det är modern ber om, men det enda ord hon lyckas urske är det avslutande. Amen. So this is a text about 3 generations. So it starts with a girl and then the little girl and the mother from Daniela. I feel I'm getting like kind of emotional, like it's hitting me like this is really the last time, and this is, well, they aren't here, but the last time with my group. And I feel I'm gonna miss them. But like Ina said, we have like the contact in Facebook, and I can follow the way in life and all their writing also. So that feels great. And this is Tilda. Jag är den kvinna som kriget gjort mig till. Tilda Rudberg. Du kan inte ha på dig uniformen, Bruno. Det är redan blod över den. Du är inte som dem, min pojk. Du är mycket bättre. Sa mor och tittade ner på den bruna skjortan med den röda banderollen och det svarta hakkorset i den vita cirkeln. Det var så hela Deutschland såg ut. De röda tygerna hängde ner över fönsterkarmarna och doppade spetsen i marken. De var överallt. Ingen kunde missa det. Vi ville alla blunda, men vi kunde inte leva med ögonen slutna, för då skulle vi vara döda, menade mor. Vad menar du, Hilda? Han måste se ut som de andra barnen. Han måste bete sig som de vill. Annars kan vi inte vara säkra här, sa far och såg på Bruno som 11 år. Jag var 15 år. And this is a story about, well, Germany and the war. It's like a historic novel. And I know she's planning to write, like, they all want to write more and better and big ones. And the last one that was printed is from Carl Johansson Sjögren. I'll have to move on. Det har gått över ett år sedan jag senast pratade med henne nu. Jag kan inte säga att jag saknar henne något så infernaliskt, men visst händer det att jag saknar henne då och då. Under dessa små korta stunder då jag inte ömkat henne en tanke under sådär ett par månader. Då när jag faktiskt tänker på henne och ser hennes blå ögon, hennes släta bleka ansikte med de små solbruna fräknarna på, och då går mina tankar på högvarv. Det kunde ha varit vi, om hon nu inte hade varit den hon verkligen är, under den där oskyldiga masken som hon hela tiden bar framför sig. På utsidan inte synes glad, snäll, charmerande och attraktiv kvinna. Men på insidan rena raka motsatsen. Jag trodde på hennes lögner. Jag förlitade mig på hennes mask istället för att fokusera på vad som kunde gömmas eller skyddas där bakom. Men nu vet jag bättre. Okay. So they are, that's the fun part, because they are very different, and when you read a text from them, you know which one has written it. Yeah, okay, over and out.
That's great. That's lovely. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I can really sense, because I know how much you've invested in the project, in those young people, and I can really feel the, you know, your emotion at kind of saying goodbye to the formal aspect of the project. In terms of what the project has been doing this year, there's been, as well as Elizabeth carrying on with the work, and, you know, say, Inish doing her individual work with Ranim. There's also been a new Swedish writer into the group who's very much been working out of Kultivera, and other libraries in the region, and doing, Cecilia has been doing similar work to the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years as well. And I know Cecilia sadly wasn't able to join us this morning, but she's been doing sort of writing prompts and making the most of social media, and Facebook as the platform and Instagram as the platform to send images and prompts for young people. Okay, I think we've got a couple of minutes left before we need to close and shift on to the next event. But does anybody have anything that they'd like to ask, that they'd like to comment on about the project? If you'd like to unmute and say anything or add anything. Kate, Charlotte and Shireen. Yeah, Charlotte. Kate.
Thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed hearing, and I love the idea of you going and collecting children, like children capture in libraries. And it resonated quite a lot. I worked in Forest School, and what really made my heart glad was that the children who weren't striving and performing well in the schools, when we got out into the Forest School, and there was much more body, whole person learning. There was one boy in particular who I'll never forget. You know, he was so capable and so confident, and his self-esteem grew massively. And again, like your story, Yoga, when I fed that back to one of the teachers, they said, "Wow, but he says nothing in the classroom. He's so." So I was really heartened. I loved the different examples that was given in great detail. I mean, the stories of people traveling from places like Syria, children, what they all have expressed safely in these circumstances. It's really beautiful. Lovely to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I think that was an experience that we all had, and I could see Shireen nodding, and I'm kind of tingling as I remember those very particular children and young people that moved us and kind of leapt somewhere very special for themselves and for their families and their teachers. Okay, is there anything else anybody would like to say? Shireen, yes.
I hope there's not a very loud echo as I talk. Good, you're right. I'm utterly grateful to be part of, from an outsider looking in, how much the whole project has accomplished. I know Young Writers Lab was the group of children that y'all were looking at was more than 15, 16 years old. But the ones that we worked with, Mel and Joke, we worked with 11, 12 years old, to see how they came out from their shells, to see another side of them, how creativity brought out the real kids. And like what Joke said, inspiring And we know, Kate, like what you mentioned earlier on, how someone was very quiet and you saw another side of this child. Mel and I saw that too. And from the first group of the kids that we worked with, one of the children has done a residency over the summer here in Jönköping and has just published her first book. So to see this process, like how you plant a seed, a photosynthesis process, there's no words. There's absolutely no words to say. Thank you so much, Young Writers Lab. I hope you all get to continue in different ways, spread out more seeds like the dandelions.
That's lovely. Thank you, Shireen. Yes, I think we are still spreading seeds like the dandelions. And I know for me as a both as a writer and a writing practitioner, it's really influenced my practice to be a part of this project. And just as a kind of person, and to work with people from different countries and different cultures and at different paces, it's been a really powerful project to be part of. So I'd like to thank you all for coming this morning, whether you've come up from Jönköping or Ecuador or Portugal, Tranos, Norway, Carmarthen, and Stroud. Is that where you are at the moment, Kate? Stroud-ish?
I'm in Carmarthen.
Oh, you're in Carmarthen. Oh.
Yeah.
Welcome, not far away from us then. Thank you all for coming this morning and kind of sharing about Young Writers Lab, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. And thank you very much to Dominic and to Colin for providing the backstage support and the facilitation of it all, and enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I ask one thing? Elizabeth, can you hold up the books again just as a fan, just as you did earlier? And I'm going to ask Dominic to take a photo